Hey guys, Brad here from Old Glory Knives. So I'm going to make a full-length video on how I take my Old Glory scales, profile into a knife, and to a finished polished knife handle. So if you want to see all the details behind it, stick around. I'm going to go from this to a finished product. On this model, the Survivor, a lot of times I finish it out with the spine just slightly exposed. So with that process, I finish these scales out before I attach them to the blade itself. All right, to begin with, there is a front and back, and they'll come as one piece. There will be a sticker on the back indicating what's the front, what's the back. All right, so we're gonna split these right down the middle. So this next step, you want to determine which way you want your handle facing. With this knife, I have the flag etched on the blade, so I wanted the flag facing the same way. With the hatchet, it really didn't matter since the handle's vertical, but that's up to you. So determine which way you want it, and then we're going to lay it out. All right, so after I take the stickers off the back side, I want to identify what's the back, so I just put a mark on it. That way when I'm working, I don't accidentally put the handle on backwards. So this is the back. All right, now you want to determine where you're going to drill your holes for your pins or your screws. In my case, I'm going to use Gullso bolts. So that's a 3/16. So what I've done is I've lined up the first hole with one of the stars, and I did an outline so you can kind of take this off and kind of see how it's going to look. And I like that layout. So again, my first hole is going to be dead center in that star. That gives me a landmark of all these scales. I'm doing 4 matching knives, so I want them all identical. So each hole is going to be in that dead center of that first star there. All right, here's one of the scarier parts for me, but just because it's so committal. I'm going to mark out where exactly the holes are going to be drilled. I start with an awl. So I got the first one punched right in the dead center of that. So with an awl, you can get that hole dead center. You can kind of, if it's off a little bit, you can, like I did this one, I can tweak it and punch it again, kind of center it up. That helps your drill bit stay aligned with where you want your holes. And just to ensure that the drill bit doesn't wander, I start with a smaller bit. This is the 3/32, just to get a pilot hole exactly where I want it. Okay, now that I have my pilot hole, the next step is to drill my 3/16 hole for the bolt. If you're using pins in your handle, you can move on to the next step. This step is for countersinking the hole for the Gullso bolts. And I got this counter bore from Maker Material. It's specifically for this size of bolt. Now we're going to get things lined up to drill the second hole. And you can see they'll turn out nice and even. So I'm going to use a 3/16 G10 rod. It's nice and secure, it's not going to wobble around. Alright, so next thing I want to do is determine, again, another landmark. You could center it in the white line or the red line. I'm going to split the lines and drill the hole right, see if I can get dead center. You can see that. Dead center between the two lines. I'm going to clamp it down. Alright, next step is to outline the handle and where I want to cut it out. So what I do is I use some G10 pins to hold it in place. And I take an X-Acto knife. Okay, so I use a small wheel attachment on my OBM 2x72 grinder. If you don't have one of those, this part you can do with a Dremel. It's just a matter of getting into the curves, getting right up to the metal. So one thing you want to keep in mind is starting out, you want to use a 36 grit or a 60. I use the 36 starting out, and the purpose for that is if you use a finer grit, it's going to burn your scales. So take off the most of the material with the larger grit and then work your way up to the finer grits. Okay, at this point, I have the shape I want with the 36 grit. I'm going to jump to 120 grit and then 220 grit. As much as I can do on the 2x72, and then I'll go to a Dremel. Alright y'all, here we go, final stretch. So everything's shaped up on the 2x72, 120 and 220 grit. So what I do is I switch to hand sanding to 220. I do that to blend everything in case there's some deep spots from the grinder, and then I finish it out with 500, and then I go to the buffer. I also have my Dremel in case there's some deep spots from using the grinder. I'll be able to blend everything in, and then like I said, finish it out, blend everything with hand sanding with 220 up to 500, then buffer. Here we go. Alright, at your 500 grit level, you're going to start seeing the deeper scratches start to reveal themselves, like, and they're gonna look white. There's gonna be white scratches. So if there's some, there's a little spot right there. I briefly hit this, but you can see those white, deeper lines. So that's where we're gonna really pay attention to now. The rest of this has been sanded. There's no white lines showing through, so that's all good, ready for the buffer. And the other thing I do is I put my fingernail behind the sandpaper to really get into those deeper spots. See, like this area right here. One tip I want to share is I do my hand sanding on top of a microfiber cloth that's folded over twice on top of a table. A couple reasons for that. Like if I'm getting into this area here, hand sanding, I'm putting a lot of pressure on this corner right here. With this micarta, you could damage this if this is on a hard surface and you're putting all that pressure down. So that helps protect it quite a bit while you're doing your sanding. The other thing is I'll fold my sandpaper, put it flat down, and if I have an area that's rounded off, I'll just kind of rotate the handle as I'm moving it around, do the sanding. That gives it a little give. Okay, so it's sanded to 500 grit. You can see the image really starts to come through now. There's no real significant white scratches anywhere, so I'd say it's ready for the buffer. Okay, here we are at the buffer. I hit it with a medium and a fine. Alright, in between these, I like to hit it with a microfiber and get off any of the previous compound. Alright, scales are all finished up, all buffed and ready to put on the knife. I like to put a coat of Old Glory blade wax on the knife before I put the handles on. And I'll eventually put a little bit of thread lock on these. I'm happy with how everything looks, and thread lock will just keep it from vibrating loose. I'll take just a little bit of the same wax and apply it to the scales.